Welcome back to Celebrity Radio. It's Alex Belfield talking to fascinating people and people who enlighten us and educate us and also enthrall us with wonderful books for Christmas. The Christmas Carol is released this December, and it basically tells the stories of the songs we've been singing our entire life. And the man who's behind it is musical genius Andrew Gant. How are you?
Good. Nice to speak to you, Alex.
Yeah, good to talk to you too. I mean, what a life you've had. Firstly, let's talk about you. I mean, musically, you've done it all, haven't you? And you really are at the top of your game. I guess you were just born to be musical.
Well, it's been an interesting and varied career. Musicians have always had to dabble in lots of different things. It kind of goes with the territory.
What's best for you? Is it the writing, the performing, the teaching? Because you do it all, don't you?
Yeah. You know, I'm going to duck that question and say that they're different aspects of the same thing. You know, it's very rewarding to be able to approach music from different sides. It's like looking at the same thing from different aspects. You know, if you're writing about something, there's no better way of learning it than to try and teach it and to try and explain it to students who will ask you difficult questions. You know, what did you mean by this? And you have to think, hang on, what did I mean by that? And then if you're looking at the history of a piece of music and how it fitted into the context that it was written for, you perform it and then you find out what it's about and what it's like. So they're all part of the same thing, and I'm very lucky that I've been able to do those different aspects of music making.
One of the biggest things you do, of course, is composing, and I'm always curious, as a lover of music, to know how you know that it's original, because how do we know we haven't heard it somewhere else before? Must be the biggest dread you have in your mind.
Yeah, well, yes, it's a complex question, that, and I think probably you can't ever really know, and I think it's not always necessary to try and pretend that you can. I don't think it's a bad thing to show your influences or to acknowledge that you're building on something that already exists. If you look at, for example, the continuum of musical style from Haydn to Mozart and then from Mozart to Beethoven, you know, there are bits of Mozart that could be Haydn, there are bits of Beethoven that could be Mozart. So they started with something that they'd inherited and then built on it and turned it into their own. So I think, you know, we have to acknowledge that in all fields of creative endeavour.
Yeah, I heard somebody the other day do a review of a new Andrew Lloyd Webber show, and they said that Mozart really should stop nicking some of the ideas of Andrew Lloyd Webber. Made me laugh. I thought it was a nice line.
Let's face it, film music and that sort of kind of genre, it relies for its effects on using effects that were developed by other composers. The orchestration, the style of melody, the kind of emotional response that you get from a Rachmaninoff or a Strauss then translates absolutely perfectly into a Hollywood film score. And why not? It works.
And I guess there aren't many notes on the keyboard, but there are millions of songs. So sooner or later somebody's going to copy something, aren't they?
Well, and songs, what is a song? The song has a common library of gestures, a cadence, a key. Who wrote a perfect cadence in C major?
Right.
Lennon and McCartney used it, so did Bach.
Yes. It's very interesting. One of the things that you do most of all, and you're most famous for, are your choirs and these magnificent sounds that you create. Is there anything more thrilling than standing in an enormous cathedral with an amazing choir and hearing that noise?
I think the word you're looking for, rather than thrilling, is terrifying.
Is it really? Truly?
No, of course it is. Yeah, it is a great thrill. But, enormous cathedrals have their challenges. Keeping people together. The sound travels from one end of the building to the other and gets there, sometimes a number of seconds late. So if you've got musicians spread out apart, how do you keep them together?
Yeah, it's fascinating. And of all the venues you've ever performed, which are your favourite? Because you've done everywhere, haven't you, really?
Yeah. Well, I was lucky enough earlier in my career to be a member of the choir at Westminster Abbey for a couple of years. And that's a place that always has a very special resonance for me, because it has a kind of intimacy as well as being an absolutely magnificent Gothic cathedral, among the finest in the world as a piece of architecture. You walk in through that screen and see the crossing, those enormous walls rising up in front of you like a cliff, and it's failed to inspire me when I worked there. But at the same time, the services in the choir, in the centre there, have an intimacy. You feel like you're taking part in something which has a focus, which in a building like St Paul's, which is much more obviously theatrical, much more of a stage set, you really don't. I mean, it is an absolutely wonderful building, but it's just huge. You know, it sounds huge, it looks huge, and it doesn't, I think, have that same sense of intimacy.
And again, you feel like you're doing something important in those venues, don't you?
Oh, yes, indeed, yes. But again, you know, one of the great joys of working in a place like that is that you have the great set-piece events, and then the next day, or even later the same day, you have Evensong. You know, the daily cycle that's been going on there for hundreds of years, and will always continue to do so.
Yeah, you've written this brand new book, which I think Middle England is going to love. Christmas Carols from Village Green to Church Choir is the new book by Andrew Gant. It's out now, available in all good bookshops and, of course, on Amazon as well. And it tells the story of 20 of our favourite Christmas carols. And, of course, we sing these songs every year, but we're not quite sure why or what they mean. You explain them. How difficult was it to find out the absolute history and truth about these carols?
Well, I have to say it was a huge amount of fun. Difficult, not really, because there are people who have researched them, but you find sort of during the history of English church music that there are sort of signposts along the way. You know, carols were very much a poor relation. They weren't considered worthy of sort of serious study or even of singing in church for most of their history. And then it's kind of in the 19th century that people start to say, hang on, this is actually a rather interesting part of our heritage. Let's try and collect them together. And you get people like William Sands, who made an important collection in 1833. And then there are others, of course, going forward from there. And so once you've discovered those guys, then you're halfway there. You know, you follow the leads that they've given. Folks on collectors, Cecil Sharp, Ralph Vaughan Williams, absolutely central to the story. And those are your guides. Those are your kind of leaders through the historical undergrowth.
And it's funny how people get them wrong. I think some people think it's Good King Wenceslas, Last Looked Out, and of course it's not. It's Good King Wenceslas Last.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think of that. That's right. Well, that poem, you know, when it was first written, which was in the late 19th century, it was those words were written by an English clergyman because he'd found an old spring carol which dates back to the 16th century and probably before that, with Latin words which are absolutely nothing to do with Christmas. You know, the carols originally were not necessarily just to do with Christmas, but it was actually a rather bawdy carol about the coming of spring and fertility and all that kind of thing. And this clergyman, John Mason Neale, wrote these words, which a lot of people thought were frankly rubbish, all the sort of inverted syntax, good my page, and all this kind of thing, yes. Which may be why people sort of trip over them a little bit.
They are very wordy, these carols, but they're also very beautiful. I guess probably the most famous carol and most popular is Once in Royal David City. Would you agree?
Possibly, yes. I think if you asked every English caroller that, you'd probably get a variety of different answers. There was a poll done some years ago for the favourite carol. The one that came top was, perhaps surprisingly, was In the Bleak Midwinter.
Wow, I'm surprised.
Carol, you know, it was actually composed by a composer and written by a poet. It's not a traditional carol at all.
I would think for me, though, I mean, when I watch Kings at Christmas, the Once in Royal is certainly the big one. Of course, the other one that everybody looks forward to for the children is Away in a Manger. We always love that. Tell us the history of that one, Away in a Manger.
Well, that has an interesting history too. Again, it's a youngster by carol standards. It was first published and written in about 1883, I think, in America, in a paper of the Universalist Church, and it's quite interesting how many of these carols have their origins in sort of not sort of mainstream Orthodox churches, but in other kind of denominations, if you like. And it was claimed in this newspaper that these words were by Martin Luther, but they're not. They made that up, partly to try and sell tickets for a pageant that they were having about the 100th anniversary of Luther's birth, and they even managed to get the year wrong for that as well. But that, you know, they said it confidently, so naturally people believed it, and years after that, the words appeared in hymn books under the title Luther's Cradle Hymn, which was just simply wrong. They made it up. And then, again, there are two tunes to it. It's one of the carols, which there are quite a number, where American choirs use a different tune from the one that we use in England. And both the tunes were written by Americans, but one of them has stuck in the US and one of them has stuck here.
Amazing. And is this a very English thing? I mean, the Americans, when I go over there for Christmas and Thanksgiving, you don't hear them singing the 12 Days of Christmas. Is this unique to England?
It's not unique, no. I mean, one of the interesting things about doing this book is that I've also done an American edition, which is coming out next year. And I sent it off to the American editor, and he said, yeah, that's great, but Americans won't know this one, they won't know that one, and they will insist on having this one and that one instead. So I had to lop out 2 or 3 chapters and write 2 or 3 more.
Wow.
So the tradition is certainly there, but it's different, and that's, again, it's been one of the interesting things about it. You know, like so much in American life, quite a bit of it went over there, you know, right back from the early days of the Pilgrim Fathers and stuck, but it's kind of, from there, it's taken a different direction.
And then songs like the 12 Days of Christmas, it's become one of those fun carols that everybody enjoys. Is it an old fable or is it more of a modern history song?
No, it's definitely a genuine folk carol, that one, which means that you can't say where it came from or when, because nobody knows. I think it's the first published version that, certainly that I'm aware of, dates from about 1770, something like that, in a children's songbook. But that kind of implies that it already existed before that. So it's a folk song. Yeah, I think it's a counting song. It belongs in the same tradition as things like, you know, Green Grow the Rushes O and One Man Went to Mow, that kind of thing. Yeah. It's a counting song.
I think this is all very fascinating. And finally, and then I'll leave you in peace, O Little Town of Bethlehem. Of course, religious connotations to that. They weren't all religious, though, were they? I mean, we presume they were, but they all come from different places.
Sure. Well, that's a great story, that one. The tune was a folk song, which was collected by Ralph Vaughan Williams from an old guy in a pub in Surrey, sung to a poem about a ploughboy who mistreats his oxen, and then is carried off to hell by a devil who comes up from underground in a puff of blue smoke. So that's what that song was originally about.
Andrew, are you making this up, or is this actually a research book? Did you just...
I have seen with my own eyes Vaughan Williams' manuscript copy of what he wrote down when Mr. Garman sang to him in Forest Green, Surrey in 1903. And it's, I am a ploughboy brave, I'm old as all my fathers were. It's all about the cows and the devil, and it's a great song and a lot of fun, and nothing whatever to do with church or Christmas.
Fascinating. Listen, it's been lovely talking to you. I could talk to you all day. This new book is fabulous and perfect for this time of year. Good job not bringing it out in June. I don't think it would have done as well, do you?
You think? Yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
Andrew Gant's new book is called Christmas Carols, From Village Green to Church Choir. It is a fascinating insight into the Christmas that we've all loved since being a child and we've sung along with. It gives you a great insight into 20 of our favourite Christmas carols. Andrew, great to talk to you. Thank you for your time.
And you, Alex. Thanks.